Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the lineup. My name is Lily Dite. I'm on the publicity team over here at Soho Press. And if this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. This is a digital event series where we put Soho crime authors in conversation with one another to talk about their new books. We have a very special preview event for you today. Before we get into it, though, we have a little bit of housekeeping stuff to talk about, like we always do. We are able to do this series because Mystery to Me Books in Madison, Wisconsin helps us with it. So if you are really interested in the book that we're discussing today, feel free to click this little green button at the bottom of your screen here and support the store directly by purchasing your copy from them. Our next event will be in March. We'll be talking with crime author Leonie Swan about her Agnes Sharp series, the end of it, and then also the adaptation of her book Three Bags Full, which is being turned into a movie later this year. And then, of course, by attending a lineup event, we give away 3 gift cards at the end. So just by RSVPing and watching the event unfold live, you are entered to win a gift card to Mystery to Me. Make sure you stay to the end of the event to see if you've won, and then we will email all the winners afterwards. And we also do some questions from the audience at the end. So if you, at any point during this event, have a question that you want to ask Kalau or Nick, you can put it in this little question Q&A box on the right side of your screen over here. And we'll field those at the end. So thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce you to the folks that we're talking to today, and then I'm going to get out of here. First of all, from Soho Press, we have Nick Whitney, who is an editor. And before Soho, he worked in the editorial department at the feminist press at CUNY. Nick, thank you for joining us today, our second Soho Press visitor on the lineup. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk
And
and
then
listen.
discussing Jackson Alone, which came out in January, we have Kalau Almony, who is a Japanese English literary translator based in Kawasaki, Japan. His translations include the work of Fuminori Nakamura, Tahi Saihate, and Shinya Tanaka, and he is a 2025 National Endowment for the Arts Translation Fellow. Born and raised in Kaulu, Hawaii, Kalau completed his BA in Comparative Literature at Brown University and MA in East Asian Languages and Literatures at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Jackson Alone by Jose Ando and translated by Kalau Almony is available now. Thank you both for talking. We have a really interesting discussion that's going to unfold tonight. Thank you all for being here. And let's get into it.
Okay, let's do this. Yeah, I'm so excited, Kalau, to speak with you after months of working together, primarily over email. This is really like our face-to-face debut.
Right.
Yeah, and this would be interesting because a lot of the lineup events are, author to author. So now we have editor to translator, where we'll also be talking about the source material and the author as well. And I want to get into like the book and our process perhaps, and as well as your process as a translator. So we have a lot to talk about in a short 45 minutes. But I want to start by inviting you to read the opening paragraph of Jackson Alone, both in its original Japanese and then in your stunning translation. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so I brought props, everyone. So first we're gonna start with the Japanese. So I brought the Japanese book. So this is the Japanese cover here. Okay. ココアを混ぜたような肌。パッチリしすぎて悪魔じみた目。黒ひょうみたいな手足の彼はベッドに貼り付けにされていた。そのビデオを見てすぐにジャクソンはそれが自分だと察した。その時のことは覚えていないし、似ている男なんて世界中に何人もいると思う。だけど、ここは日本で、この外見でこんな風に扱われるのはジャクソン一人。Hey, so that's the opening in Japanese. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, here's the American cover. And let me read the English. the cocoa skin, the devilish eyes, too big and too bright, the limbs like a panther's. Jackson knew the moment he saw the video that the man tied to the bed was him. He didn't remember it, and he knew there were tons of people in this world who looked like him. But this was Japan, and here in Japan, it was Jackson alone who looked like that and was treated this way. Yeah, that's the opening 2 ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for reading. It just dawned on me that reading the opening paragraph, which is almost polemical in nature, just like grabbing the reader into or challenging the reader with an argument, might necessitate us just saying briefly what the book is about or what it concerns. So can I give you the honor of talking about, I guess, broad strokes, the premise of the book?
Yeah. So I guess since we started with the opening, I can start with the opening. But Jackson Alone begins with a character, Jackson, who works in an athletic gear company, um, wearing a shirt that he received to work. And then someone spots a QR code on the back of the shirt, which links to a pornographic video of a man who looks very much like Jackson and that Jackson thinks is himself. And as he tries to kind of unravel who sent him this shirt, like what happened, what to do about this revenge porn situation, Jackson encounters 3 other men who also look very much like him and have also received shirts with QR codes on the back that link to the same video. And the 4 of them kind of team up to get revenge.
Yeah, exactly. And Ando-san himself, the author, is openly queer and Black Japanese author, and so too are these 4 characters. And throughout the book, as they meet each other and they, I guess, question what to do in the face of this targeted video, they team up and, in fact, they switch places and identities with each other. They switch outfits. They switch, wallets and phones, and in the process of trying to figure out who is behind this video, which is spreading online like a viral video does, they decide to enact basically tiny revenges on the people in their lives, exploiting this kind of absurd fact that nobody in the dominant culture can seem to tell them apart. All of which is sort of gestured at by this opening paragraph, which Kalau just read. And Kalau, I guess to start, I wanted to talk to you about your process, perhaps, as a translator. So going from the Japanese text to the English text, how do you get from point A to point B? I mean, are you reading the text in sort of like a big gulp and kind of taking a break and making sense of it and writing like your sense of it in English, or are you going character by character and like sort of plodding along? Just talk to us a little bit about your process and your approach to this type of text.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like overall practice, I guess I'm sort of a get it all on paper and then go back and revise sort of person. Especially, Japanese is so grammatically removed from English, right? That for me, trying to take a Japanese sentence and make an English sentence, it helps to have a little bit of remove to think about like how this actually sounds best in English. And there, because of the difference between these 2 languages, you also really have to think about like what you're prioritizing as you're translating. So if we were to think about that opening sentence, right? In the Japanese, it begins with that same list of qualities, right? The eyes, the skin, the limbs. But that's all modifying the guy who's tied to the bed. So that's all one sentence, right? Right. These qualities describing the man tied to the bed. And so in English, like bringing that over into English, you're left with this choice of, do I leave this as one sentence, which necessarily is going to highlight the man, because that's the subject of the sentence, or do I split this up and have this list of features that's highlighted first in the text? And in this case, it's the opening, that description is really, really important, and it's there first for a reason. So I decided to cut that sentence and split it into two things so we can highlight those features first. So yeah, thinking about what the text is actually trying to accomplish by using language in a certain way is the fun part, the tricky part.
Yeah, totally. And I'm also thinking about, I think Ando-san as an author, like from now being immersed in your translation of his text, is always kind of playing with the reader's perception of his own characters and what you think of them. And in this opening paragraph, in this opening line, in fact, you have actually like a derogatory description of Jackson himself, although it also seems to be coming from Jackson's perspective.
Yeah. Yes.
And so right from the start, you're always questioning um, like the optics of the text, and that just becomes ever more complicated as you go into the novel. And yeah, I just think it's amazing. And now I happen to know that you also have done translating work on subtitling work on film, and then of course you do literary translation work as well from books. And I wondered if your practice as a translator is different in those two scenarios, where when you're working on subtitling a film, you have on screen a character's voice and sort of emotion spelled out for you. Whereas in a book, you are actually tasked with sort of investigating if it's not immediately clear, or in this text where what's said and what's felt can sometimes be at odds with each other. Um, that to me seems like a much more difficult task. Do you enter into different modes or frames of reference when you are translating different types of texts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so let me just say I haven't done subtitling in a super long time. So I'm kind of reaching back to to think about my mindset while I was doing that. But yeah, I think there is I think the bigger thing that I would kind of have in mind is the constraints. So when you're subtitling something, you don't, right? Like it it has to be a certain length, and it can only appear on the screen for a certain amount of time. So you really have to be concerned about, like, is my word choice here gonna fit, right? And how can I simplify this so that it will come across to a reader quickly? Um, and so, yeah, you also just because of those material constraints, you don't have as much room to experiment or to play with things. And it forces you to kind of prioritize in a way that maybe you don't have to with a literary text, which I think kind of, how can I say, amplifies the qualities that you were pointing out, right? That you're usually dealing with dialogue, maybe voiceover a little bit. So it's generally more direct. There are fewer kind of layers because the depth of a film comes through the image and the audio playing with each other, right? Whereas, yeah, a book like Jackson Alone, you have these utterances from a third person narrator, but clearly filtered through one of these characters, but you're not always necessarily sure exactly which one or why they are thinking that way. And you really have to kind of triangulate the position of the narrator's utterance to make sure that it lands in English in a similar kind of way.
Yeah, I can imagine this would be a tricky one to translate. It's on the surface, it actually reads quite simply and directly. It's a short novel. It's dialogue heavy, I would say, but because you have characters actively being different characters, you're like kind of tracking how they all speak, or would they subtly speak differently? I'm just fascinated by it. I'm fascinated even as a reader of the English text. It's just I'm just clearly very excited about talking about this book. Now, can we talk about? I would love to talk about Jose Ando and basically your journey from reading Ando-san's work for the first time to that spark. Like, what was the experience like first reading Jackson Alone to how we got to this conversation, basically? I mean, can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I brought one more prop. So Jackson Alone originally, so it won the Bungay Prize. So this is a Bungay, which is like a literary magazine put out by Ando-san's publisher, Kaori Shobo. Right here it says like announcing the Bungay Prize, and here's Ando-san's Jackson Alone. Right. So every year, this literary magazine puts out a prize for new writers, and in 2022, Ando-san was one of two winners for Jackson Alone. And yeah, I happened to pick this. This is Bungay is my favorite literary magazine in Japan, so I pretty consistently read this, and I try to keep up with the prize winners. So yeah, I picked this up right when it came out. I read it, and pretty immediately, well, as you were saying, Nick, the opening is just a provocation, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm totally honest, my first reaction to those opening lines were like, ooh, this guy is aiming high. Like, can he follow through with this? I was a little bit suspicious at first, honestly, but that suspicion kept me reading. I raced through it initially. So I raced through that. The moment where I was like, okay, yeah, this book is amazing is actually a really quiet one. I think like maybe midway through the first chapter, the first time Jackson is stopped by the police, and it's not, it's just one or two lines, and it's just him getting stopped by the police for riding a bike. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, yep, this guy gets it. This is a very real experience for people who live in Japan and don't look pure Japanese. And something that has happened to me all the time. So once I got there, I was like, okay, this guy knows what's going on. And it was just, I think I read it in one night. Like, I think I just sat down and read through it. And so from there, I pretty immediately reached out to the publisher, Kaori Shobo, to say that I was really, really interested in working on this. And then after a couple of months later, the book was nominated for the Akutagawa Prize. And at that point, Kaori Shobo asked me to produce materials, a sample translation and a synopsis of the work to try and sell those rights to a foreign publisher. I think just before that, I had actually contacted Soho Press just to kind of put feelers out there and be like, I think you guys would really, really like this book. And so everything worked out according to plan.
Yeah. Which it always does, right? Like it always works out like that.
Yeah. If only.
Now, will you just, yeah, I know, exactly. Will you tell our lovely viewers what the Akutagawa Prize is, and what that means and what that has meant for Jose Ando in the past year or so?
Yeah. So okay. So about the Akutagawa Prize first. It has this reputation in English of being like the most prestigious literary prize in Japan. I don't know that that's exactly true, but I will say it's the one that gets the most media attention in Japan. So there are two really big prizes that are covered in lots of media, and they're the Akutagawa Prize and the what's the other one? The Naoki Prize are the ones that you'll see on TV here. And what the Akutagawa Prize is, I believe, to be nominated for the Akutagawa Prize, your novel has to have been published in a literary magazine. So what they're doing is picking up like the best literary works that were published over the past year or past 6 months, because they give it 2 times a year, and choosing the most representative literary works. And generally it's for new authors, although I don't actually know what the restriction is on that, because people win for like 5th book or whatever. I think as long as you haven't won it before, you're okay to be nominated. Um, so yeah, that's a huge, it's one of those things that's said to make or break a career. Although again, I think that's kind of blown out of proportion. I think there are people who, Murakami Haruki never won, and he's doing just fine. But it is seen as like one of those rites of passage, or like a kind of a christening of an author. In Ando's case, he won on his 3rd nomination. So far he has published 3 books in Japanese. All 3 have been nominated for the Akutagawa Prize, and the final one that's out so far, Daytopia, won. So yeah, and I think it was a big media moment for him, right? And that was kind of the first time that he got attention in the English media in Japan. So like the Japan Times covered his writing. And so in that sense, I think it's a really great opportunity. It was even on like morning talk shows, which is really funny because it's the content of Daytopia is even more extreme than Jackson Alone. And so, like, turning on the TV and seeing like the morning talk show, like, just to imagine the Japanese version of Regis and Kathy Lee trying to talk about a book that's set like
yeah.
I don't even know where to begin with that one. It's set on a reality dating show, but there's like an adult version that you can watch online that's kind of uncensored. And there's a whole backstory about someone who belonged to a criminal, like a gang, who is like the contestant used to torture people for a gang as his job. And so they had a really hard time talking about it, and kept things very vague, which was funny to watch.
Yes, good. Well, I mean, good on the literary establishment for still honoring that book, because at least I haven't read that one yet, but at least in Jackson Alone, and yes, the premise can come off as absurd, and yes, the events are, always brushing the realm of the absurd, if not outrightly sort of surreal. He is still talking about things that are real and that real people do experience, and he's talking frankly about queerness and being queer today. He's talking about the way that people engage with digital culture, and I'll say like a misuse digital culture, and the way that we're seeing this just every day. You wake up and you realize this more and more, but social media was such a promised land for us of connection and getting to speak with people who you wouldn't run into normally. But every day it feels like it's sort of splintering us too and leading to like dislocation. And I think Ando-san like just grapples with all of that again in a really tightly plotted book. It just feels there's no question here, Kalau, but I'm just waxing poetic. It just feels like such a hyper contemporary book. Like it is really grasping what is happening right now in a way that only Jose Ando could say or do, and that's what has excited me so much about this book.
Yeah, it's so fast paced and covers so much ground in such a short amount of text that it is kind of, if it sounds like we're having a hard time kind of summarizing everything neatly, it's a hard, and this is true for all of Ando's work, it's all hard to kind of organize and neatly summarize, because there are so many threads that he's so good at keep that like running in parallel and keeping organized, because it makes sense if you read it, I promise. But yeah, there's so much going on. And I love his one of the other things that kind of blew me away reading this book at first is just the narrative perspective that it's a third person narrator that kind of follows around characters, and in pitching it I compared it to like the like producer of a reality TV show, kind of following people around and picking like the juiciest bits that make for like a good story, which I still think is a good kind of summary of what's happening there. But I was just so blown away that this is someone's debut novel, and they managed to so smoothly kind of put together this voice that's moving between characters so easily and so comfortably. And it is a little bit disorienting, but it's so well done. And the disorienting aspect is clearly intentional, right? That yeah, I was just also immediately impressed with his abilities as like a stylist in that sense.
Yeah, me too. And now I've read the book honestly like 10 times, and I feel like each time I read it, there's like a something that I didn't notice before at all. It's so sly in that way. And I think the reality TV pitch is perfect because, in fact, reality TV factors in heavily to the plot of Jackson
Yeah.
Alone, which I won't get into for fear of spoiling it. But reality television too, like digital culture and also fandom online communities boosting what's happening on reality TV is a huge part of what happens in the book. Um, Kalau, I'm wondering, because we work on this text together as editor translator, your translation, and you're working from Jose Ando's text in Japanese. Throughout the process, did you have um, communication with the author or Ando-san? Did you get to meet him, or what's that process like? Or are you just kind of alone in your room with the text and working on it?
Yeah, so in this situation, and I think this is fairly common in Japan, my initial contact is through the publisher rather than the author. So I reached out and talked with the publisher about the right situation, um, to put together the sample and pitch everything. This particular publisher, Kaori Shobo, is really amazing to work with, very easy to work with, and are kind of happy to field my questions to Ando-san if it's necessary. But generally, they're like the mediator, right? So as I was working on this, there wasn't direct interaction between us. I think one thing, I think the biggest, how can I say, like the biggest interaction about the text was actually just was something that came from the French translator. So the French translator asked about all of the proper names, and so I got a big list of like the spelling of proper names before I even really started working on it, which was super super helpful, and cleared up most of my questions in the first place. And then maybe I asked one or two really small things through the publisher to Ando-san. Um, and then I've actually only met Anderson once in person, and it was after he won the Akutagawa Prize, and it was a very chaotic meeting. Don't I don't mean this negatively for anyone involved at all, but there were a lot of people who are all meeting each other for the first time. So there, was me, Ando-san, his editor, the foreign rights director at Kaori Shobo, who is the one person who probably knew everyone in the room, and then several literary agents, and then also a reporter came to interview us. And most of us were meeting for the first time, so it was yeah, there's a lot going on. Um, and I will say that Ando-san handled it way better than the rest of us. And he has so much poise and is just so good at reading a room and kind of telling when someone else wanted to speak and kind of directing them. I think we were all also kind of looking to him as the author for a little bit of guidance, and he more than provided it. So yeah, I really look forward to working with him more. And
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
one day being able to sit down and have a proper conversation.
Yeah, so that's so interesting because I know some translators from other languages or countries with whom I have a friendship who work really closely with the author throughout the process, and they're sort of on call to talk through a word choice or, is this what you meant by this? But it sounds like what is typical in Japanese translation is actually the opposite, or not the opposite, but a different sort of experience of translation.
Yeah, I think there are translators who work more closely with their authors. I think it does really depend on the author. I think also, part of it is definitely just the publishing ecosystem is a little bit different here. But I think part of it is also the language difference. Like, I'm
Mhm.
sure writers working from like French or Spanish or Italian have probably a better grasp of English on
Yeah,
average than writers working in Japanese. I know there are writers working in Japanese who know English really well, and I would be interested to hear something about like how Ito Hiromi or someone like that works with her translators. Um, but yeah,
yeah,
there's variety. I think also I maybe um, definitely for the first draft I would want to look at everything myself. I don't think I would want to from the
yeah,
get go start asking questions because I would also just feel a little bit silly because later most of the things in the end you would be like, oh yeah, no, I know what that is. Why am I wasting your time by asking about it? So
yeah. Yeah, fascinating. And also, like, and this is all credit to you, really. Like, you kind of caught on to Ando-san really early and kind of took up his work, right? Like, we published Nakamura as well, who is, by the time we were publishing his translation, Fuminori Nakamura was very well known in his context as sort of the king of Japanese noir, and we're very proud to publish him. This is a very different case, I think, where we are working on this project, and actively as that's happening, and Nakamura actually won the Akutagawa, I think, as well years ago, years and years ago. But as we're working on this author's first text, he is winning this award, which is getting him sudden sort of media attention as we're working on the project. And it's just, I can imagine, I mean, it's just sort of a chaotic but exceptionally like awesome moment to be working on this author. Um, yeah, it's very cool.
yeah, it's I don't I mean, I was a little bit surprised when he won the Akutagawa Prize just because it was such a radical book. Right? It was such a, but it's not, I gotta say, I obviously was hoping every time. And wasn't going to be shocked because the books are really, really good. And like I said, the content might be, um, it might make some people a little bit squeamish, but just the style and the prose and everything is at such a high caliber that I think the Kutagawa judges had to kind of recognize it eventually, and it's really every single one of his books. If you look at because they've all been nominated for the Akutagawa Prize, you can see the judges' statements about every book, and even the times he didn't win, like for Jackson Alone, even though he didn't win, the comments are extremely positive. Right, no one is panning his work at any point in time. Um, yeah, so throughout
Yeah.
every nomination, the comments have been very, very positive, and it's just been so clear that this is like a real talent.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, he got some early judge support from like Yoko Ogawa, and so cool to see these legends kind of uplift this, frankly, like insurgent voice
Mm,
and talent. it's been cool to witness. And even from when I was taking on this project from you, of course I would Google Jose Ando's name, and it would be very hard to find any on our internet anything about in the English internet, if you will, anything about him. And now you can in fact find these, things about him and read more about his perspective. And as I've learned more about his process and about his reasoning for writing, I've just gotten even more involved in what he's doing and his trajectory. It's been cool to see. So back to the book, I would love to get your this is all to sort of entice our lovely viewers tonight or this morning, for you, Kalau, to pick up the book. For me, the book is just as much about these striking images and scenarios as it is about the writing and is about the pace and the POV switches. But there's just throughout the book a string of extraordinary, kind of unforgettable images that pervade the text. And I will share one that sticks out in my mind. This is one that I sort of grafted onto the first time I read, but I'm also wondering if you could present us with one moment from the text where you were like this, and you kind of already mentioned the bike, the police stop, but like one moment that like grabbed you into this world and kind of blew your mind. Um, so let me start with mine, okay? I think that's fair.
Yeah.
The four guys, they have met. This is shortly after they've all become aware of the video. They have now met and they're kind of in their hotel room deciding like what to do. And one of them brings a weed cookie to the hotel room and they all partake. And on the floor of the hotel room is a map of the entire world, like just in a sort of crude outline, just a continent map. And they each take turns saying where their mom is from and where their dad is from with their toes on the carpet of the hotel room. And as they do, their limbs, their legs crisscross and they sort of become knotted up. And I won't give my analysis of that because I think it's quite clear and powerful. But shortly after that, because they're kind of now stoned from the weed cookies, it's still in their limb tangled knot, they fall asleep and they like sort of drift off peacefully. That to me is still one of the most powerful images from the book, and an image from it that will never leave me. And I'm sorry for our viewers for spoiling that. You're still gonna love it. But Kalau, do you have a moment like that from the book early on in the book, so to avoid spoilers, that resonates with you?
First, that's one of my favorite scenes too. That whole scene is so good. It's so well done, and it's just a beautiful image to like end a chapter on, right? So I talked about the bicycle thing, which it also isn't really even like, it's not even really a scene. It's like two lines of like a police officer stopped me, so I showed him the like registration for my bike or something. And it's honestly like for that one, it's the offhandedness of it, the fact that like, this is something that happens all the time, so I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. That really resonated with me. We talked about the opening, which is a total provocation. If there's something else from the beginning, on the theme of tangled limbs and everything, and riding bikes. At the end of the first chapter, Jackson starts riding his bike through this park that is also a cruising spot. And there's another really brief description of how Jackson knew in the dark there were these tangles of limbs, like in the bushes and on the benches, of all of these guys just like wrapped up together. That was also kind of an image that really stuck with me, because Jackson's also kind of like hunting these guys in a not sexy way, in a like I'm going to freak you out and hit you with my bike way. That was a really kind of interesting inversion of that like image of the cruising spot. Like, you know, it's not really a place for Jackson to be free. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting moment. I love that part too. And kind of underscores the thing throughout that courses throughout the novel, which is that Jackson always is at a remove from other people or even himself, and uh, is sometimes willfully so. Like, it is my choice to be a cipher and to be unknowable to these people, and my colleagues, and then sometimes it is willed upon him by the larger structures and codes of society that segment people into sexuality and race, and that actively other Jackson throughout. Um, and yeah, the book just brilliantly exists in that murky space between those two things, and to me is never being overly pedantic about one perspective on it, but is just depicting. But that moment that you described, Kalau, so beautifully, I think, speaks to that sort of recurring theme. Great. Should
Yeah.
we? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say if I can add one other thing to that.
Please.
In one of his essays somewhere, you know, Ando-san talks about the motivation for writing Jackson Alone, and you know, he's kind of joking. He says it's kind of joking, kind of not, that you know, whenever you read a book with a minority character or a mixed race character, from about page 3, there's got to be some scene where they're like, you know, and the taste of this dish remind me of my mother's home cooking. My mother was born here and my father was born here, and they met.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And so part of the motivation for writing Jackson Alone was to give us a mixed race minority character without the baggage of personal history, right? So to actually write a character who's just you know, who can exist on their own, who can exist as one figure, without all of that background explanation of who they are. And I think, you know, that feels disorienting,
Yeah.
in a way that is also quite provocative and says something about what we expect from these kinds of characters in literature, right?
Yeah, totally. I caught on to this very early, and I think it will frustrate some readers, quite frankly, because the reason we read novels, the reason we're all readers, is to get to empathize or explore deeply these characters from a different place, or from a, even in a well-meaning way. Please, get to know these marginalized characters and who they are and where they're from, and what makes them. But Ando at every step of the way sort of refuses that, right? Like, we don't get to know his family, we don't know his last name, we don't, the scene that I'm talking about where they're pointing on their toes at the world map, we don't know where they're pointing. They're just
Yeah.
pointing at the map. They are from somewhere. And does it give them meaning to know, for us to know where exactly they're from? Or do they have meaning just because they are, in fact, from somewhere, right? Yeah.
Okay, if I can, two last thoughts before we go to Q&A or whatever we're doing next. When I so the we were talking about conversations between translators and authors, and I do really one day want to ask Ando-san about that map of the world, because as I was working on it, I considered asking. And I spent like maybe an hour or so, you know, outlining the room, like what a hotel room would look like, and kind of drawing, if this were the map of the world, like how could it be positioned? Because we know that this one has to be Africa, like Africa has to be over here, and we know Japan has to be over here. So I was kind of doing this whole logic puzzle trying to figure it out, and then I realized, like, wait a minute, this is not this is not the point. Like, this is not the point. So I put that down. But I do, in my heart, I do want to ask one day. But the other thing that I want to say is that, for me as a reader, I think that resistance that especially Jackson shows to revealing anything about himself, really, like revealing his background, revealing his personality, that resistance was very, very, it was one of the things that most resonated with me. So, to have a mixed race minority character, a queer character, who's like, I'm not going to talk to my coworkers about my background. Like, fuck that. Was just like, oh, this is great. I love this. And that, I found it really empowering, and I hope and I believe that there will be readers who also find some sort of strength or some sort of, see themselves in that too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, lovely. I think it's about time. I don't know how to check the Q&A, but if there are questions for Kalau or about the book or anything else we talked about, Lily, take it away. See your face.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for that. If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the little Q&A box. Kalau, I have a question for you that I always like to ask lineup authors, especially because the book is out, so potentially maybe some folks here have read the book, or they like what you're talking about and maybe they haven't read the book yet. But are there any other movies or books or music, or what would be like your recommended list of art for this book? Some like other required reading to get into Jackson Alone.
Okay, so if I were to go with books, I would give another Soho title, and I would say Night of the Baba Yaga would be a great one, because it's this, the voice is a little bit different, but again, it's kind of this queer thriller from Japan, that will put you in the right kind of mindset for this sort of story. I think films. I don't know why this is. Maybe it's just because I rewatched it last weekend, but Sinners kind of comes to mind because we have doubling. There's not as much music. There aren't any vampires, so it's not actually a good comparison in that sense. But we do have doppelgangers. We do have multiples. And the other one that comes to mind is in terms of films, for the interview, I recently translated an interview for Ando-san, and he mentioned a director that as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, of course you like him. But Park Chan-wook, Old Boy. Old Boy might be another really good comparison to kind of put you in the mind for this like revenge sort of story.
Yeah, that's totally. That didn't surprise me either, Kalau, to see that. As well as Out, the novel Out, which is just so clearly a good comparative title for Jackson Alone, and the works of Kawakami, and whom Ando cites as like a huge influence on him.
Yeah. That's another. So this is not. I don't think the English is out yet, but later this year, Miyako Kawakami's new novel, Sisters in Yellow, I believe is the English title, will be coming out. And if you like literary crime, highly recommend it. That would also pair excellently with Jackson Alone. So it's very interesting to see Miyako Kawakami doing kind of like a crime book, but it's very good.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for that. I didn't know that was coming out. That's awesome. Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you. So we have a few questions here. First from Jeffrey. This one's for Nick. The book is all about how people see other people. So did that end up playing into how Soho promoted the book?
Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you for your question. Pretending I don't know who Jeffrey is. Yeah, I guess it did in a way. I mean, Kalau, do you mind holding up our cover again?
Oh
Um,
yeah, I love. I was so excited to see this.
we wanted a sort of like security camera, almost surveillance vibe, which is becomes very pertinent to the book, but there are as well throughout the book sort of you see other characters through like a CCTV panel. You see people through phone screens and TV screens, and um, in the very last chapter of the book, which is like a radical rupture from, in many ways, from the book you've read before. A lot of things happen that I won't say right now, but we were toying with the eye or even like an almost a big brother type of look for the cover, um, with both the English and the Japanese on even our American cover. And I will say, my dear colleague Johnny came up with a brilliant idea for a post for Jackson Alone, which has basically, before you swipe to see like some of the blurbs for the book, there's a sort of like false content warning thing, which again, it's like daring you. Am I gonna look at this? Am I gonna swipe through this? Like, am I wanting to look at what's to follow? And I found that a really playful and thematically appropriate way of promoting the book. Something I never would have come up with, and which is why I don't work in marketing. Yeah.
Can I say one of my favorite additions from Nick is we actually incorporated like actual QR codes into the text too, which
Yes.
are not in the Japanese. And this was just this was Nick's proposition, and it was such a good idea, and it looks so cool. And you buy it and scan the QR code and see what comes up.
This is such a great book marketing that we're doing here as well. we have the props. Kalau came with props, and we're all better for it. Okay, so our Raul asks, Kalau, did you begin by translating Japanese to English, vice versa, or both? So basically, like the
Oh yeah.
translation journey.
Um, so definitely Japanese to English. I've done a little bit of English to Japanese work, but no, not really anything literary. I lived in Hawaii for most of my life, and so I did a lot of really random, odd things like translating restaurant menus and stuff like that into Japanese. Um, it would be really cool to translate a book into Japanese one day, but I think it would also take me much longer because
Mm.
I am a native English speaker, and my Japanese is clearly good, but I think I would also need a really good editor just to double check my grammar and punctuation. um, but yeah, so I learned Japanese in school. I'm from Hawaii. I took Japanese in high school. In university, my second year, I took a translation class, and I really, really liked it, and I've been doing it ever since. Um, so yeah, it's fun. Give it a try.
That's great. I'm always so interested in how translators find their way uh, to translating literature. And then from Arthur, without getting into spoilers, which word, phrase, or part of the book was the hardest to translate?
Ooh, that's that's a really good question. Also, again, I have to say that all of this talk about translating, like, we finished the book itself like over a year ago. So
Yeah, that's
it's all kind of like reaching. I would say a specific word or phrase. Ah. You know, I'm having a hard time coming up with a specific word or phrase in this one that was challenging, but I will say making sure that um, it's kind of clear whose perspective we're in because perspective switches a lot is kind of tricky. And there's one scene in particular that I know Nick and I went back and forth on a little bit where a character is dressed as another character and pretending to be a character from an anime that he likes where there's like three or four different perspectives all rolled into one, like four if you count the narrator too. And the like, you know, Japanese doesn't, you don't need to use a pronoun, so you can kind of just like, you can just drop, like there doesn't need to be I or anything, so you can just kind of drop that information in a way that makes it sound slightly jumpy in English. That I think in the end we just wound up like leaning into the jumpiness of it a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of have to because you're working within certain constraints of, making the original text legible as the original text. But yeah, I agonized, as you remember, I agonized over that part because it's a really cool part where the
yeah,
character, again, dressed as another character, is actually asleep and dreaming about
yeah.
being the anime character. And as he's waking up, he sort of is shedding the skin of that character. And it's a really challenging, it takes a lot of work on the readers and to grapple with what's the
Mm,
several layers of identity that are happening in that moment. But it is a
yeah,
cool part.
yeah. Yeah, one other thing that comes to mind is the title too, actually, which, to be fair, like it, can't, it, I decided on it pretty quickly and just kind of ran with it. And by the time someone was like, "By the way, how did you translate the title?" It seemed like I'd already submitted the materials and they were being handed to other people, so there was no going back. Um, but you know, the Japanese is Jackson Hitori, which is like one person, so it's like one Jackson, which just doesn't really make any sense in English. So I also really wanted something that could be worked into the text because that phrase Jackson Hitori shows up in the text itself. So I went with Jackson Alone because it kind of stands out just a little bit as, you know, not quite the most casual English, like not something you would just say, but could be worked into like a literary text within the context of things going on.
The title is so good. It does so much work. It is so good. The right call, I think. One more question. A lot of folks super interested in the translation aspect of this book, which I love to see. Linda asks, since different languages have different numbers of nuanced word meanings, how do you decide which English word to use?
Oh yeah, it's so case by case. What can I think of a good example? Yeah, I mean, so I think the broad answer is that, you know, what is the what is the goal of this utterance? Like, right, what is this supposed to make the reader feel like? Like how, like what's the ideal impact? And then kind of working backwards from there. So for me, I, I always really struggle with dialogue. I think that that's one of the hardest things for me to translate to make something that sounds both real and that kind of lands. And especially the way people talk in Japanese and English is so different, like the way things are clipped. Um, so the like opening exchange between not the one, well, between Jackson and Zen is good too, but the one between Jackson and the coach of the captain of the basketball team, where they're actually like kind of like arguing, um, was, you know, really I had to be really creative to come up with things that sounded like, you know, kind of like they're not yelling at each other, but they're clearly like at each other's throats in English, and like coming up with a language for that. Um, you know, what sounds aggressive and kind of snarky and kind of sarcastic and mean. You know, it's just,
Mm.
the Japanese might, you know, if you just translate literally, it's going to come off as quite flat, right? And another thing that comes up with dialogue, like people don't swear in the same way in Japanese, right? So like in English, sometimes you find yourself adding in like a fuck or something like that wouldn't really be there in the original. But in this moment, like obviously this person's gonna drop an F-bomb because they're pissed off, right? So those kinds of nuances are fun to play with, but also really challenging. And so thinking about how you want it to sound to the reader, I think, is the way to get at it.
That's so interesting. Thank you. And thank you, Linda, for that question. Thank you, everybody, for those questions. Kalau, Nick, do you have anything to add before we end tonight? We covered a lot of ground.
Do I have anything else? I really don't want to end by just saying like sometimes you got to drop an F-bomb, but I guess
that might be the best way.
I think yeah.
Well, on that
note, I just want to send out a round of thank yous to Lily for doing such an incredible event series, and to Mystery to Me Bookstore. Y'all support your local indie bookstore now more than ever. And to Kalau for bringing this project into our lives. And this has been, for me, just so gratifying as an editor. Like my job is to learn about what's going on in the world and what's happening all over, and it's such an honor to me to be able to work on books like this and to work with brilliant translators like Kalau. So thank you.
Yeah, and ditto to everything Nick said. Thank you so much, Lily, for organizing this, and thank you so much, Mystery to Me, for hosting. And yeah, Nick has been an amazing editor to work with too. So if you're working on a translation project that's right for Soho Press, get in touch with him. He's good.
He's great. We love him. And Kalau, thank you so much. Kalau is in Japan, so he is braving the early morning for us, those of us over in the States. So thank you. Thanks all around, everybody. I have some gift card winners to announce here, and then we can all get on with our Tuesday evenings or Wednesday mornings.
Yeah.
Our $25 gift card is going to Jeffrey Zuckerman. Thank you.
Yay, Jeffrey.
Jeffrey for being here. You've won a gift card. Elizabeth at Mystery to Me, who keeps us all afloat, will reach out to you either tonight or tomorrow morning to give you the information. Our $50 gift card is going to Arthur Bilal. Congratulations. And I'm so sorry if I am mispronouncing your name. I apologize. And then our $75 gift card is going to Yoko Sakinao. So thank you guys, everybody, for being here, for joining us. Kalau, Nick, thank you. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. And we'll see you guys in March for a celebration of all things Leonie Swan. Thanks.
Yay. It'll be a fun one. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.